The book of Job, chapter 40. And the Lord God answered Job and said, Will anyone pervert judgment with the mighty one? And he that reproves God, let him return it for answer. And Job answered and said to the Lord, Why do I yet plead? Being rebuked, even while reproving the Lord. Hearing such things, whereas I am nothing. And what shall I answer to these arguments? I will lay my hand upon my mouth. I have spoken once, but I will not do so a second time. And the Lord yet again answered, and spoke to Job out of the cloud, saying, Nay, gird up now thy loins like a man, and I will ask thee, and do thou answer me. Do not set aside my judgment. And dost thou think that I have dealt with thee in any other way than that thou mightest appear to be righteous? Hast thou an arm like the Lord's? Or dost thou thunder with a voice like his? Assume now a lofty bearing and power, and clothe thyself with glory and honor, and send forth messengers with wrath, and lay low every haughty one. Bring down also the proud man, and consume at once the ungodly, and hide them together in the earth, and fill their faces with shame. Then will I confess that thy right hand can save thee. But now look at the wild beasts with thee. They eat grass like oxen. Behold now, his strength is in his loins, and his force is in the navel of his belly. He sets up his tail like a cypress, and his nerves are wrapped together. His sides are sides of brass, and his backbone is as cast iron. This is the chief of the creation of the Lord, made to be played with by his angels. And when he has gone up to a steep mountain, he causes joy to the quadrupeds in the deep. He lies under trees of every kind, by the papyrus and reed and bulrush. And the great trees make a shadow over him with their branches, and so do the bushes of the field. If there should be a flood, he will not perceive it. He trusts that Jordan will rush up into his mouth. Yet one shall take him in his sight. One shall catch him with a cord and pierce his nose. Shalom Aleichem, Assalamu Alaikum. Welcome to Job chapter 40. In this chapter there are 24 verses. In the hard copy you'll notice that in Job chapter 39, verse 31, it lines up with Job 40, verse 1 in the qbible.com, the way it's ordered there. And so we're going to start with verse 1, which is in the Brenton's hard copy, verse 31. And it reads, answer, it for answer. That's verse 2, okay. Let him return it for answer. footnote reads judgment. And so this is verse 2. Let me just move that footnote so it makes a little more sense. So the answer, or I should say the question that Elohim asks Job is the following: will anyone pervert judgment with the Mighty One? Versus, shall he that contends with Shaddai instruct him? So this actually is really a big difference. I didn't outline it initially, but if I can just do this on the fly, basically what Elohim is telling Job is that will anyone in general pervert judgment? It's not being specific, so it's more of a generalization versus targeting Job specifically. So in the Masoretic, it's more accusatory sounding. So Elohim is saying in the Masoretic, the one that's contending with Shaddai, obviously it's Job. You think you're going to teach me? You're going to instruct me? He that is reproving Elohim, let him answer. Basically, it's all you, Job. You're the one contending with me, and you think you can teach me? You think you can correct me? And so on. You're going to answer. Whereas the tone in the Septuagint, it's a lot more respectful, not targeted, not accusatory. It's basically saying, will anyone pervert judgment with the Mighty One? Is this possible for someone to do this? And he that is reproving Elohim, let him return it for answer. So this is more of a reference to Job. And so the answer, I should go to verse 4 now. It says, why do I yet plead, being rebuked, even while reproving the Lord? So, you know what? Let me look this up in my hard copies behind me, just to get more clarity on verse 2 first before I proceed. Okay, so in regards to verse 2, the Lexham Septuagint renders the word pervert as shun. So will anyone shun judgment? And it's similar to an expression used in one of the subsequent verses, which we will look at very shortly. It'll make more sense as we get through it. So verse 4, why do I yet plead? Job answers, being rebuked even while reproving the Lord. And the Lexham, again, gives a little more clarity to the statement. Job is saying, why do I yet plead, being admonished and reproved by the Lord? So it seems to make more sense that Job is essentially saying, I am being admonished, so I'm being corrected, and also corrected. It seems to be the same kind of meaning unless I look these words up. So to admonish is more of a warning, whereas to reprove means the mistake has already occurred. So why do I yet plead, being warned, even while being corrected by Elohim? Not that he is the one correcting Elohim. So that is a possible interpretation. I'm not saying this dogmatically. This could be the other way. It could be that he is being warned by Elohim, but he's also trying to correct Elohim. My notes here say Job is not saying he's correcting the Lord. He's saying he is the one being corrected. And I fact-checked. Do they seem to agree with this assessment? Let me just fact check this. So the Net's version of the Septuagint, the New English Translation, renders the word reproving as confuting, which means trying to prove wrong by argument or evidence. That seems more respectful to me, rather than reproving, like he's scolding the Lord or something. So now I fact check that. Let's move on. It says, hearing such things, whereas I am nothing. So he's saying, he's hearing what Elohim is telling him. He's digesting it, internalizing it. He's meditating on it. It's a lot to take in. It's a lot for him to digest. And he confesses he's nothing in the scheme of things. He knows his place. He's been put in his place. Verses, behold, I am vile. What shall I answer thee? So vile is a lot more, you can say he's humble in the Septuagint, but to say he's vile means he's reprehensible. You could even say evil to some degree. But he's despicable, reprehensible. He's not pure, very vile, and you could say disgusting in some senses. So we're going to move to verse 7. It says, there's an omission of no. So Elohim is answering to Job regarding his statement that he's spoken once and he's not going to speak again. I'm not going to speak anymore. But Elohim challenges Job and says, no, you're going to speak again. So it's a direct response to Job's last statement and puts the statement in a better context. Why is he saying gird up your loins? Because he said, no, you are not going to do what you said. You're going to answer me. I'm going to ask you, you're going to answer me. It's a commandment. Verse 8, do not set aside my judgment. And that is similar to what was expressed at the beginning of the chapter, when Elohim expresses pervert judgment is more like setting aside judgment, shunning judgment. So do not set aside my judgment. So it's kind of reiterated in verse 8. Verses, will you also disannul my judgment? Which can mean frustrate or break. Are you trying to frustrate my judgment or break it? Versus to set aside or to shun. If we can put that as well. Now, buckle up. We have a massive, possibly cataclysmic difference in this chapter. First one in quite a while. It says, dost thou think, Elohim speaking to Job, dost thou think that I have dealt with thee in any other way than that thou mightest appear to be righteous? I'm going to interpret this after I read the next, the Masoretic version. Will you condemn me that you may be righteous? So Elohim in the Septuagint is reassuring Job that he is indeed righteous in his sight. Not only that, but even everything that Elohim has allowed to happen to Job and has orchestrated, essentially, he writes the stories of our lives. This was all meant to keep Job righteous, and not for him to turn aside. It was not meant for him to turn aside from the righteous path and for him to become unrighteous, for Job to become wicked or to sin. The Masoretic, on the other hand, is saying that Elohim is contending with Job, contending that, Job, you are not righteous, which would be a massive contradiction to the opening of the book a narrative contradiction where Elohim calls him upright and blameless. So this would bring up the question then, did Job start off as a righteous man, and then throughout the narrative he eventually becomes unrighteous? Because many scholars, Bible experts, will state that Job had become bitter, had become self-absorbed, and went down a downward spiral of sorts, and even became self-righteous to some degree, according to their interpretation. But that is not the fact. That's not the reality of what happened in the story. And we're going to see that as we get to the end of this book. It's going to answer this question. Maybe I should just spoil it right now, but the answer is no. He was righteous before, during, and after. And Elohim backs up this because he does not accuse Job. He does not convict or condemn Job of any guilt or wrongdoing. In fact, it's the opposite. He convicts and puts the wrongdoing on the three friends. They are the ones who spoke wrongly. So that's a spoiler, but I think a lot of people know about this anyways, but that's just stating the fact of this narrative. Verse 11, and send forth messengers, which are angels, with wrath. Whose wrath? Angels' wrath or Elohim's? Seems to be Elohim's wrath. Verses to cast abroad the rage of thy wrath. So Elohim is asking Job, can you send angels with wrath? Are you able to do this with your own wrath? Versus Elohim instructing Job to simply get angry. Show me your rage, show me your wrath. Verse 12, a significant difference. And consume at once the ungodly, versus tread down the wicked in their place. So Elohim is saying, are you able to do this? Can you consume all the ungodly all at the same time, versus simply treading them down, trampling upon them wherever they are? Verse 13, significant difference. Continuing on with this action upon the ungodly, and hide them together in the earth. Is this hiding them for safety? No, it's essentially to bury them alive under the soil, maybe even the earth's crust, all at once, all at the same time, all of them. Versus hide them in the dust together. So this seems to be to conceal them, keep them safe in relatively harmless dust. We have a big difference in the same verse. Fill their faces with shame versus bind their faces in secret. Why is this a big difference? Because when you fill the wicked's faces with shame, you repay them with humiliation, with shame, versus to cover or conceal their face in a hidden place. So they are spared the humiliation. And they don't seem to be punished at all. You're sparing the wicked from humiliation. Whereas the Septuagint, again, is humiliating the wicked. Verse 15, we have a big difference. And this is a big question as to the identity of what is the wild beasts, or who is the beast. It's also called the beast in other Septuagint versions that you can see behind me. Versus behemoth or behemoth in Hebrew. Now, I seem to conclude here that it seems to be, after doing a lot of research, substantial research, that it could be the hippopotamus. I'm not saying this dogmatically that it's 100% certain, and I'm not going to turn away from this opinion, but that is a strong possibility that it is the hippopotamus. Whereas when you read the Masoretic version, it seems to be the elephant rather than the hippo. So verse 15 reads, in the deep, the footnote, in the deep, okay, I don't seem to see that. In the field or the low place. I think we're in the wrong verse. Let's just move on. Verse 17. Okay, I don't seem to see. Okay, that's verse 20. I'm going to move this to verse 20. So verse 17, in the meantime, we'll go there right after I just correct this. Okay, so pardon my corrections on the fly. You get to see a little bit of behind the scenes here. So verse 17, he sets up his tail like a cypress, versus he moves his tail like a cedar. Well, if you look into hippos and their behavior, hippos actually do set up their tail like a cypress. Not saying it's literally as tall or as the same size as a cypress tree, nor is his tail the same size as a cedar tree, but it is a metaphor. It's comparative. So let me just look into a deeper dive for a moment. Okay, going back to verse 16 for a moment. His strength is in his loins. That can mean the genitals. It could mean the hips. But it also says his force, which is another way to say strength, is in the navel of his belly, in his core, in his abdomen. And this rings true of the hippopotamus. That their skin is very thick. Their abdomen is like 2 inches thick, I believe, the skin itself, and they are known to be very solid and practically unbreakable in their how do you say, not the trunk, because it's a confusing term, but their torso. Okay, whereas this does not apply to the elephant. Their navel and so on, but especially the abdomen of the elephant is actually not as tough as the hippopotamus. It is more breakable, more susceptible to injury. Just going to my AI discussion regarding hippos and elephants. So elephants' belly is actually its weak point, whereas the hippopotamus, they have a much stronger barrier on their abdomen, on their stomach. It has muscular shielding, as it describes it here. Okay, regarding the tail, setting it up like a cypress. So a hippopotamus has a very short, flat, paddle-like tail, about 20 inches long. It does not look like a tree in terms of size, but again, this is more of a metaphor, a simile rather than a metaphor. But however, the hippo uses its tail to flick or spray its dung as a powerful territorial display. Okay, now I'm intrigued. And it says, when a hippo is aggressive or marking territory, it holds its tail stiff and upright, literally setting it up, again, which mirrors the stiff, unyielding nature of a cypress tree. So that's when they mark their territory by flicking or spraying its dung as a powerful territorial display. Okay, so I want to look that up now. So here's a clip of a hippo waving its tail, and it's supposed to be like a cypress tree. This could also be a marking of territory, but it doesn't seem to be that, because it's not using its fecal matter. It's using some kind of liquid. Not sure if that's water or what. So we'll stop that. And here's a clip of cedar, I should say cypress trees, moving in the wind. And can we see a similarity with the hippo tail? I would say, yeah, there's a little bit of a similarity there. So I want to add that even the shape of the tail looks like a cypress tree. So hippos do move their tail like that. Setting up the tail, perhaps it's closer to moving the tail. If we look at the original Hebrew word, it is delight in, to bend down, to move, to set up. I'm not sure if that actually, maybe setting up, like moving it up, I'm not sure. In any case, and then it's, so the hippos do this, but in the Masoretic, that seems to be more like a dinosaur in my opinion, moving your tail, I should say a hippo moving its tail like a cedar tree, since cedar trees are known to be very massive trees. How do you move your tail like a cedar? How do cedars move? Whereas a cypress tree does move in the wind a lot more easily. The Septuagint says his nerves are wrapped together. Okay, I assumed it was the Masoretic that was saying his nerves are wrapped together. I'm not sure what that means anymore, because the sinews of his stones being wrapped together actually is more based on the anatomical structure of hippos and how their genitals, not only hippos but even the elephants, is tucked in their abdomen. Their scrotum is not external, it's internal. So that applies to both. So the Masoretic seems more accurate in terms of the anatomy. So I'm not sure what nerves being wrapped together could mean. I'll have to look into that. So in terms of the tendons, I should say the nerves, it can be interpreted as tendons and muscles. Ligaments are woven, I should say wrapped together, meaning they are compacted and braided like a thick rope. So tightly knit, and we can see that, yeah, the hippo's muscles are very much the way it's built, like a tank, we could say. Very much like a tank. They've got columns of muscle in their legs especially. They can support up to 3,000 kilograms. So their tendons and ligaments are exceptionally thick and braided in order to handle the tension. So yeah, that's actually very applicable to the hippo. So I digress. That is very applicable. They're both anatomically correct, but the Septuagint is what we lean towards in this channel. It did come before Yeshua was born, as born of the Virgin Mary. So yeah, this makes sense that Elohim is very much has intimate knowledge of how their ligaments, their muscles are tightly woven together. Here's just a quick image search. Hippo muscles. It's a hippo. And then that's the skeleton, and here are the muscles. Look at that. That looks really tightly woven, if you ask me. Okay. Verse 18, his sides are sides of brass, versus his bones being pieces of brass. So for the hippo, this is true. As I mentioned, their skin is 2 inches thick, whereas an elephant's bones are not as such. They're not strong like brass. In fact, they're light, and this is to accommodate their weight. Verse 19, creation. So this is the chief of the creation of the Lord. So is it true? Is it really talking about the hippos, that they are the chief of the creation? Are they the first of the creation of Elohim? Versus he is the chief of the ways of Elohim. So hippos are they're the masters, they're the head, they're the beginning, the first, the choice part of the ways of the Torah of Elohim. That doesn't make sense. It makes sense to call man or even the angels as that. But to say that the hippos are the chief of the creation of Elohim is a very heavy statement to make. It seems to be, maybe this isn't even talking about hippos anymore. Maybe it's going off to another topic, another subject. So we have a significant difference. It reads that this chief of creation, whether it's the beast or a hippo or a behemoth, was made to be played with by his angels. So are they playing with this creature? Or are they mocking him? It can also be rendered as mock. But the Masoretic doesn't render it that way. It says, he that made him can make his sword to approach unto him. Meaning he, Elohim, can approach with his sword to perhaps threaten this creature, whoever this creature is, versus being a plaything or perhaps even mockery, an object, target for mockery, for mocking. Maybe mockery is a better way to render it. Okay. And next, verse 19, we have a footnote to mention. Same verse. Played with could be mocked. I don't think it's in that way. The S word there. I don't want to get into trouble there, so I won't say that. Verse 20. Significant difference. When he has gone up to a steep mountain, this can also be rendered as a hill. He causes joy to the quadrupeds in the deep, versus surely the mountains bring him forth food where all the beasts of the field play. So the footnote reads in the deep, for in the deep, in the field or in the low place. So creatures in the field or in the low place. What is the low place? It could be the bottom of a river, perhaps. This could mean that when the hippo leaves the water, going by the hippo narrative, that the rest of the animals, especially the ones in the deep of the waters, who are those? Probably the fish, probably the crocodiles. I've seen documentaries where once the hippos leave, the crocodiles can be themselves. They can feast. They don't have to worry about bumping into hippo and then getting them enraged and then starting pretty much a gang war between the crocs and hippos. Versus the mountains bringing the hippo as food, or whoever this beast is, perhaps behemoth. Verse 21, we have the papyrus, reed, and bulrush versus the reed and fence. I think we're going to ignore the rest of that there. And ignore that too. Verse 23, big difference. If there should be a flood, he will not perceive it. Versus, behold, he drinks up a river and hastes not. So this seems to be talking about a hippo. It's more realistic and grounded in the Septuagint. If there's a flood, a hippo will not perceive that there's a flood because its home is in the waters. But on the other hand, the Masoretic is portraying this creature as some sort of giant or a dinosaur that can drink up a river. Can drink a river. Supernatural abilities. And he trusts that Jordan will rush up into his mouth. So the river will rush up into his mouth. Not the complete river, but parts of the river. Whereas, again, the Masoretic is continuing with this narrative that this beast, this creature, is able to drink up the Jordan, and it seems to be alluding to the entire Jordan into his mouth. It's a stronger argument that it's alluding to the full river in the Masoretic. Again, the Septuagint is more grounded in reality. The Masoretic, however, seems to be making exaggerations and portraying this creature as some type of giant or titan or even a dinosaur. Last verse. Yet one shall take him in his sight. One shall catch him with a cord and pierce his nose. Versus he takes it with his eyes. His nose pierces through snares. So he's taking what with his eyes? The water, perhaps? So it's a little, I don't know if that's cryptic, but it's hard to interpret. He takes it with his eyes, so maybe it's the snares. He's taking the snares with his eyes, and his nose pierces through snares. So it's cryptic in both, but just stick with me for a moment. I believe, and I don't have this in my notes, but I seem to be, I'm reading into this verse as possibly a messianic verse. Because if my intuition right now is on the mark, and this is not a dinosaur, it's not a giant, but it could be like an allusion to Satan, the devil, and possibly, again, I'm not saying this dogmatically, but if Behemoth, or this beast being described in chapter 40, is the same as what we're going to read in 41, spoiler alert, it's a Leviathan, the serpent. If they are one and the same, then this could be a messianic prophecy. Why? Because this seems to be alluding to the one who will take him in his sight. Who's his? Is it Elohim or is it the devil? It seems to be Elohim's sight. And who is that one? It seems to be Michael, the archangel, as mentioned in Revelation, that a strong angel will take the devil, take hold of him, and he has a great chain in his hand. This could be a foreshadowing of that prophecy. One shall catch him, again, if it's Satan, catching Satan with a cord. What is this cord? Could be that great chain. And piercing his nose, well, that's not really mentioned in Revelation, but I'm not sure what to make of that. Maybe that's bruising his head. I don't know. It's a little bit of a stretch, but that's a little detail that is not included in Revelation. So that's all for this chapter. It's quite a doozy. There's a lot in there, and we've got a cataclysmic difference. So I hope this makes more sense. It really certainly puts Elohim in a much more respectful light. That he's not accusing Job. He's not trying to set up Job for failure. He's very much a loving and caring father. And he was essentially reassuring Job when we read that cataclysmic difference that he was trying to ensure Job maintained his righteousness, his integrity. Those sufferings he went through were not meant to destroy him or to cause him to sin, but everything that he allowed Job to go through was meant to keep him in his good graces, not for him to fail or to fall or to be destroyed, because that would be a contradiction of everything he said about Job to Satan. And Elohim declares the truth. He knows the hearts of all, and he knows what Job is made of. So it's quite reassuring that, this is the Elohim of Israel. That's the Elohim that personally I serve. And it's reassuring to know that he is good and he has our best interests at heart. So that's all for this video. Thank you very much for your time. Till next time, I bid you all shalom aleichem, assalamu alaikum, irini mazisu, pax vobiscum, peace be unto you, and maranatha.